Oh yeah, 다 지로 넘어서 tani 소소 산에 가버려 봐 이나가 tani 강을 다시 될래도 뭐 아니 내가 듣기 보여요. 요스.
So, first of all, to all of my Dharma friends, wherever you may be, I wish you greetings, Tashi Dele, and I hope that you are well and I hope that you are happy.
아니 다 들으면 간지 티세 투투 tani 로라 이님이자 다 럼바지다. 고자야 될 녀시자니 전하고 요아래. 다 뒤는 다 말음바지다 용거 요아레스.
So then, today we will be continuing with this kind of a series of these short, perhaps 22 or so lamrim, or stages of the path meditations. So this is part of that sequence.
아니 뒤는 다 생정원다고도 다 들리겠네 가시로 사오레스.
We've already covered a number of these, such as the mind's potential and so forth.
아니 당아로서 tani 맞생노를 같이 못했더니 아니 게일레 진디고 뭐게일레 진디고 사테다 할레비트니 렌데스야트 차시 뭐지자 아니 드리조조데 뭐게일레 진디고 아니 야 뉴마사람도 그러와 어거이뇨다 되지겠네서 지레스.
So another one of the very important topics for us to understand from the stages of the path teachings are the results of virtuous or wholesome karma and the results of non-virtuous or unwholesome karma. And so specifically today we will be speaking about these results of non-virtuous karma, in particular suffering.
다 대시에 개야 되면더니 다 나로스 멀리야 보테 레바야 보테 다 든지자 첨보테 요나 나로스 먹게야 하겠더니 강에 뉴마세 돼야돼 그렇다 뭐 뭐지 니지 선을더니 바꿔 봐이나 아니 니바템 바치도 할레비 비도 보지 용요.
So in terms of our human rebirth, it is on the basis of this human rebirth that we possess the capacity or the intelligence to, first of all, recognize that we are suffering. Recognize that we are suffering and then be able to take the steps to cease or to stop that suffering.
어떤 나로서 먹기 뭐도 더 설리나요. 더니 강에서야 뉴마세야 그거 매바데 시워지래 되어레스. 이나요. 이나요. 더로도 든지 얘는 뭐지가 얘는 뭐이나요. 아니 지바래 뭐지가 강행인한테 가리임에 또 가만히 용기면에 니서도요.
So all of us sentient beings, whether we are humans or animals, we have the same wish to be able to reduce or to stop suffering. However, the problem is that many sentient beings, such as animals and even some human beings, they are not able to correctly identify the problem of suffering, and they are not able to distinguish the causes of suffering.
근데 지자 손지 쪼된데 이나요. 누가 시바샤시 누가 시바샤 메세네라 누가 템보 지는 니선네랑 템보 뭐시소나 뭐시바시네 파 메바시 조토소나 되니 요조 시 어서 자가 메비 티세지 레요.
So one of the famous sayings of Buddha Shakyamuni is, suffering should be known. There is no suffering that can be known. So what this means is that by recognizing, understanding, and taking the steps to cease that suffering, then one will be able to get rid of that suffering, which will no longer be there.
어떤 등하게 냈을 때 버게 라파 가르제 아니 진지 가르제 차쇼 가르제 때 니서도 봐이나 니깔 마세 단단히 주테서나 모두 기보에 맞아 뭐시야시 와레스.
So in terms of these different types of sufferings, if we can recognize and distinguish the coarser types of suffering, the middling types of suffering, and the more subtle types of suffering, then on the basis of this knowledge, we can understand that in our present moment, we're actually in quite a happy situation. All right, so that will end Geshe-la's introductory remarks, and we will now go to the meditation. So please, as much as possible, put the body and the mind into a relaxed state.
아니 소소노토야 보여 메일이 자침보데 조조 게일레 지르발라 되는 쇼레스.
Now, if we turn to the situation of our human rebirth, and we recognize the preciousness and the rarity of this human rebirth, we also realize that it is the result of wholesome or virtuous karma accumulated.
Tendriga mali tsa chimbo de yopi ka thala ani di bi le chindiga sara mandi mari biga mari pa to di le chindiga thala ani di ngari mandawa di ngami ta ya thala di ngari mandawa so yores.
So, while we have this human rebirth, then it's important to distinguish the type of negative karma that we are accumulating, in particular karma that is accumulated, connected with ignorance and so forth. These lead to suffering, and we can distinguish suffering into 3 types. So in terms of the coarsest of these sufferings, this is known as the suffering of suffering. So, for example, when we speak of headaches, when we speak of any sort of different illnesses or physical illnesses and so forth, these are all sufferings which are of this coarse type. They are examples of the suffering of suffering. And all of those illnesses, whatever those illnesses may be, these are all the results of accumulated negative karma, accumulated unwholesome karma. It may seem like the illness or the discomfort arises due to some sort of temporary external condition, but this is not the case. Ultimately, they are the result of karma and affliction. So in terms of the wish to be without this suffering of suffering, for example, illness, this is something that we human beings, but also animals, naturally possess. So the meaning here is that if we only focus on removing this coarser suffering of suffering, we won't really be able to derive the meaning, the maximum benefit from this precious human rebirth. The next type of suffering, which is a little bit more difficult to distinguish, is known as the suffering of suffering. The next one is known as the suffering of change. So the suffering of change is related to, for example, these temporary happinesses. For example, from eating some delicious food, that fleeting happiness, or any other temporary fleeting samsaric or worldly happiness. These are examples of the suffering of change. So at first these things do give a little bit of happiness or a little bit of a pleasant feeling, but because they are in the nature of the suffering of change, they do not last. That is something only temporary, fleeting. And in order to sort of be able to distinguish and diminish related to this suffering of change, one does not need to be a follower of the Buddha. There are even religious traditions outside Buddhism that understand this. The most important one to understand, the more subtle type of suffering, is known as the all-pervasive or compounded suffering. In essence, this is speaking to our 5 appropriated aggregates of samsara. And it is said that these all-pervasive suffering, which is the 5 aggregates, this is the basis for all of the problems that arise within samsara in cyclic existence. It is like the root. As long as we remain possessing these aggregates under the control of karma and affliction, samsara and its associated suffering cannot be ceased. If we really want to be rid of suffering, if we really want to clear away all of our problems, we have to get rid of the situation of these 5 aggregates which are under the control of karma and affliction. Until now, having seen this problem, we haven't really been able to recognize it and in a stable way address it. We haven't been able to do that. Whatever time I have left in this rebirth in the future, I will devote myself to clearing away the causes of being born in the 3 unfortunate realms in particular, and also clearing away the causes of these aggregates within samsara and the suffering. How wonderful to be able to have the opportunity to clear away the causes of being reborn in these 3 unfortunate realms, or the 3 lower realms. Because if I were to be born there, I would only experience great problems and suffering.
대자 좀 하도 뭐 고모 토야지라 가셔 그. 바도 못해라.
The first step to be able to do this is to cultivate the causes to, from lifetime to lifetime in the future, be reborn in the fortunate realms of humans or celestial beings.
미네 소소소소 자지 뭐. 미네 저거 요나 다 대설은 로야 때 들은 바도 못 가마도 바인 다 대설 진로 차소나 강야마도 못 됐어.
If you really see yourself as precious, as important, take the steps to eliminate the causes of being reborn in these three unfortunate realms, knowing that if one were to end up there, one would only experience continuous problems.
ngal dewa goyo ngal duma gogo me se atena ko pimbo je waja ba ina nga se atena chiba chichore de mato yowan ra.
Saying that I want to experience happiness, but I don't want to experience suffering, if we continue to take these rebirths with the five aggregates time after time, we won't be able to achieve that.
tene kaze tete mliya bo za chimbo do chimbo nipa chimbo de yobi ka tela oda duma chi duma nje duma chawan de je duma yuzo le to yele ka se to ina kane keso chimos.
Then, if as much as possible, in the instant that I have this precious human rebirth, I am able to take action to reduce and eliminate the suffering of change, and the all-pervasive or compounded suffering. How wonderful, how meaningful that is.
rong 강에 요즘 몇 시에도야 이제 대 부수 번째 더 대자 좀 다 할래야 그냥 저런 소도 내가 지금
In terms of being able to get rid of my own suffering, in terms of being able to benefit or bring welfare to others, I have this amazing human rebirth, which is a basis for all of that. How amazing.
뭐야? 어다 디디치들이지 서로와 어다 던지지자 다 니까지를 사람만 알아서 어다 기보이 비가 더 왔을 때 뭐냐비 돈했더니 강에 강감에 와셔 도요 아이자 가지 더더 소소게 내가 제바이는 땡디치 도요 알아.
So Geshe said that this brings us to the conclusion of our brief meditation, and in terms of that, 건다 기보인 백임선다.
저는 단다 기보이 비자 기보이 같은 거 뭐시비 돈이라 때네. 그래서 대요더니 야들 같이 쳔보잖아. 가지기나 제도요 알아.
So on the basis also of being able to recognize our good circumstances, our happy circumstances now, this will help us to be able to achieve this greatly meaningful work.
어다 멀리야 버티다 소소소 것도 보면 소소소 다 내가 야쇼 때문에 저기 좀비톤에 저거요 알았어.
So having achieved this human rebirth, I will not allow myself to be confused or to be deceived from this task. I definitely will engage in what is greatly meaningful, important work.
야 되지.
Thank you very much.